I began to realize that people whose only crime was wanting to come to this country were being afforded way fewer rights than people charged with multiple murders, right? And it began to be very frustrating doing immigration work, realizing the system was really stacked against you if you're acting for the immigrant. And criminal work, which is where, although the consequences are very, very serious in terms of jail and the subject matter is very serious, but you have more rights. I could actually stand up in a courtroom and say, this is hearsay, it's inadmissible evidence. I couldn't do that in an immigration hearing because they could say anything they want. There's no rules of evidence.
So welcome to another episode of the Creative Spin podcast. And today I have my friend here, Lorne Sabsay. He is a Toronto criminal defense lawyer, but I know you as a friend that goes to karate with me. But
Yes.
you do not only karate, you get into other martial arts, you get into a whole bunch of other things like photography, food.
Yes.
And I'm sure more things are going to show up in this conversation. So I think this is going to be a really, really interesting conversation. But one of the things that I wanted to ask you just to start off is in terms of your, of what you do on your day to day, being a lawyer, criminal defense lawyer, what got you into this? Like, what was the aha moment? I want to be a lawyer.
Okay. It actually happened in the last 3 weeks of my undergraduate education.
Really?
Because I did not go to university thinking I was going to become a lawyer. I actually thought I was going to go into medicine. That lasted about a day and a half. Because I used to do really, really well in high school in maths and sciences. And then I got to the University of Toronto and it's like the plummeting grades as, you know, I would routinely in high school get 80s or 90s on exams. And my first midterm chemistry, I got 20%.
Ouch.
And that was by pure luck. Because I literally had to guess. You know, they have these multiple
answers.
I don't know if they still do this now, but
I think so, yeah.
But back then, it was a multiple choice. So you'd have some chemical equation and you'd work through, and then there'd be 5 possible answers. And because they're mathematical, they would try and predict the mistakes that people would make. So those would be some of the answers. And then one of the answers would be right if you did the formula right.
Yeah.
Well, about 15 minutes into this test, which was my first big sciences exam in university, I wasn't getting any of the answers. In fact, my mistakes were so profound, they couldn't even anticipate the kind of mistakes that I was making.
Okay, so right there and then you decided this might not be a good idea.
Yeah, I said, this is you know, I'll try and get this better, but I somehow feel this is not going to work. So apart from studying, my other thing that I did in universities, I was a big part of student activism. Mm-hmm. And I was on the executive at U of T of something called the Arts and Science Students Union. And that was, we were kind of like the activists. So the SAC, the Students Administrative Council, the people who were gearing themselves, I think, to be CEOs and do that kind of work, they would join that. The Arts and Science Students Union was more of a progressive, rebellious.
So you guys were the rebels.
We were the rebels. And I just went to the 50th anniversary, by the way, of
Were they
of
all
the Arts and
still
Science
rebels?
Student Union. All still rebels.
Okay.
And young rebels too. Was really happy to see because people who, 40 years after I was there, who I could see carrying the torch, So anyways, getting back to your original question about law. So I became very involved in student politics, and I did actually join the Students Administrative Council, but that was more like be a double agent kind of spy for the progressives, watching on what the conservatives were doing, that sort of thing.
Got it.
And so I would do this, and I would be doing all this student advocacy and all this kind of thing. And I decided, after I just realized the sciences thing wasn't working out all that great for me, I started going into political science. Mm-hmm. And I became very interested and I actually was accepted to do a master's at both York and U of T. My interest was in Latin American politics, and I wanted to study with Lisa North, who was a sort of El Salvador specialist at York.
Interesting.
And 3 weeks before the end of school, somebody who knew me from the student activism part of my life,
Yeah.
why don't you become a lawyer? I mean, you're doing it anyways. Like, why don't you just do it?
Well, I guess because you were debating a lot, right?
Yeah, I was, and we were having these meetings, and I was saying, this is and I was heavily involved in the anti-nuclear movement and the not just nuclear disarmament of weapons, but also nuclear power. I'm not so sure I think the same way about that as I used to then, but
Yep.
Hey, very
things change, right?
Things change, exactly, and you see how carbon is doing so much worse for our climate than nuclear power is. And,
Right.
But, we had to see how that evolved.
Exactly.
So anyhow, this guy says, why don't you consider law school? I go, well, how do you do that? And he goes, well, you write this thing called the LSAT. What's that? Well, this is I'd never heard of any of these things. And he told me what it was. Now they have courses. You can spend a year studying the LSAT
Wow.
to try and get into law school. They didn't have those courses. They had little books of previous exams. So I got my hands on a couple of those. I signed up like 3 weeks later to write it. And I just wrote it, and I scored high enough that I could get in, and that was it.
But was it something that you saw yourself interested in when you were going through and studying for these exams and all that? And like, you started thinking, you know what, there might be a future in this. This might be something I'm good at.
Yeah, because I was always interested in the social activism thing and trying to make society better. And back when I was really young, I used to actually think, one day I'll be a politician or something like that. But the closer to that you get, I think if you're normal, you sort of say, whoa, I don't know if that's for me, right?
Yeah, especially looking at today's politics. But we're not going to get into that.
Yeah, okay, but we're not going to get into that. So it just seemed natural. And that way I could do the same advocacy I was doing, except instead of for social justice, I could do it for clients, and I could get paid to do it.
That's a very good point.
So
right
yeah,
there.
so it seemed like this is the thing that I wanted to do. And I took to it right away. My first week in law school, I just loved it. The whole idea of it. And build arguments that are consistent with previously decided arguments.
This is so interesting because I've spoken to a lot of other lawyers and they're like, yeah, I knew I was going to be a lawyer like since I was a kid. And like I talked to my wife, yeah, I knew I was going to be a teacher. But, it's really interesting to see people who, didn't have much of an idea of where they were going to end up.
Yep.
And then they find their passions through chance, through life.
Yeah.
And it's like myself, I never thought I would be a designer, a marketer. Like that's not something I ever thought.
Right.
And then I kind of that's when I discovered it and I started going. So going with it. And yeah, I find it always interesting to hear these stories of people who didn't really know what they wanted to do. They didn't really find the passion. But obviously you found it because you've been doing now the lawyer thing for how long?
This is April the 1st.
Yeah.
So by next week, it will have been 36 years as a lawyer.
It's been a minute.
Maybe a minute and a half.
A minute. So did you start right away? Did you create your company right away or did you, you went all in?
And that's because, especially when I started in the 80s, there were maybe 2 criminal law firms. I didn't even know I wanted to do criminal law, to tell you the truth, when I started.
Okay.
I started off doing immigration work. And I had the privilege of working with Barbara Jackman, who is a really renowned, amazing lawyer. When I was in law school, I used to do a lot of immigration refugee work. And there's this whole process. I don't know if it's the same now because I don't do this kind of work anymore, but you would have to research the country where the people came from. And there was Amnesty International had an office near the Eaton Center. I'm talking about the mid-'80s. And so when I was a student, I would go there to learn about countries because we'd get these clients coming from these various countries, Iraq, Ghana, Africa, Latin America, of course, like all these places where you had displaced people. Yeah. And so to me, I was in seventh heaven because I'd always been a social activist and I was always interested in social justice and about stuff that was going on in other parts of the world. Yeah. And so
that's interesting. You have to, learn about all of these different cultures and all of these different countries and what goes on there. I mean, that's fascinating to me as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it absolutely, because they would do what was called an examination under oath with a senior immigration officer, and then you would supplement and write written submissions. And it wasn't just about, this is what happened to this guy. You know, he was working for a newspaper and other journalists were getting shot, and he realized that, you know, they were onto him, and he'd been getting threatening phone calls. And so there's the guy's story, or the woman's story, whoever it is. And then there is the what's going on in the country. What's happening there? Those were still in the days of apartheid in South Africa. And so, you know, you had to research and do work. And I was very involved in the South Africa Solidarity movement. I have a certificate signed by Nelson Mandela in my office, which is really nice. So I was doing all that stuff. And then I began to realize that people whose only crime was wanting to come to this country were being afforded way fewer rights than people charged with multiple murders, right? And it began to be very frustrating doing immigration work, realizing the system was really stacked against you if you're acting for the would-be immigrant. And criminal work, which is where, although the consequences are very, very serious in terms of jail and the subject matter is very serious, but you have more rights. I could actually stand up in a courtroom and say, this is hearsay, it's inadmissible evidence. I couldn't do that in an immigration hearing because they could say anything they want. There's no rules of evidence.
Wow,
and so I drifted into doing 100% criminal law, which I did for 15 years, and now I do civil and criminal. But the attraction for me, part of it is making a difference. I can't make a difference to change the world like I used to want to do when I was a student, but I can make a difference in one person's life.
One person at a time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And how was that, those first steps of starting a company? Because one thing is doing what you do. The other thing is running a company.
Yeah.
How was that? Because I know there are a lot of entrepreneurs that follow the channel. So if anybody's thinking about starting a company, I always like to bring different examples so that they could see, you know, that there are some struggles, there are some good things, some bad things.
Yeah.
How was it for you?
Okay, very difficult. Very, very difficult. It took me about 20 years of being a lawyer before I learned how to run a law firm. Okay. And the reason is this: when you're going to law school, you're being trained to be a lawyer. Mm-hmm. You're not being trained to be a business person, right?
Very different things.
Yeah. In fact, they're not even really training you to be a lawyer because they're teaching you the academic approach to law and jurisprudence and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. The how to apply it, how to become a good cross-examiner, how to engage with a jury, that's on-the-job training. That's how you learn that stuff.
But that also has a little bit to do with everyone's personality, right? Because not everybody's good to go in front of a jury and be able to plead their case and convince them properly. Or do you find that a lot of lawyers, do you find a big difference between lawyers?
Yeah, of course. So there was a time up until fairly recently, excuse me, when lawyers in Ontario were, as they are in the English tradition, separated into solicitors or barristers. So a solicitor would do your will, would close your house deal, would, if you got charged, take the information, but take it to a barrister, a trial lawyer. And I was always a barrister, not a solicitor, okay? So, you know, getting back to your original question about, you know, starting a business as a lawyer, I had always thought, and I know I'm not alone in this, that you just be a really good professional and the business will take care of itself. And you see, you know that that's not the way it works. Yeah. And it's a hard lesson to learn.
It is.
It's like, I don't understand. I'm out there, I'm winning cases, but I'm broke and I can't pay my rent and I can't do this. And
because there's that business side, the expenses, the time that has to be spent organizing this company.
Yep.
I don't think a lot of people understand any company.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what it is. There's the accounting side that nobody wants to talk about.
Yeah.
There's the organizing of the office itself. If you have people working with you,
Yep.
or under you, then that's another level on its own. You know, it's really difficult to navigate a company if you just think you're going to be doing what you like to do and that's going to be it.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you do want to do that, my advice is, I don't know if you're in this, think the same way, but it's like, okay, go in like that, but you have to realize you're going to have to hire an accountant, someone to be a bookkeeper, all of these people, because you cannot do everything yourself.
No, and when I first started, I did do everything myself.
As does everybody.
As does everybody. And then you realize, okay, the only time I actually make money is by preparing to go to court and going to court. But I'm spending all my time trying to run the business and do the books and do all of this thing. So I'm not making any money. And I don't know what I'm doing on the other side anyways.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult. And a lot of criminal lawyers, they're kind of like lone wolves. I said at the beginning that, there weren't many criminal law firms to join when I started. Yeah. Now there are, but there weren't. So all of us tend to just, we'd share space in an office or something. And I'm in an office space right now. I'm we got a lot of lawyers in there, but I'm one of the few who have a full-time assistant and a full-time accountant and a full-time bookkeeper.
So you've learned your lessons.
I learned my lessons, but I did learn them the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've always looking back, I would say, if you want to be a professional, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a lawyer, an architect, a doctor, whatever. Anything. You need someone to advise you on the business and marketing side, because that's a whole other thing too.
That's a whole other thing. Yes, agreed.
And let those professionals deal with that aspect. And don't think you can reinvent the wheel yourself.
It doesn't mean that you have to step 100% away from those parts of the business, but I think your job should be essentially supervising it.
Yeah.
Looking at it, going, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. Go ahead with it. Or, you know what? No, change it up a little bit. But spending the time doing everything, I would not advise anybody to do. Because if you're trying to run a company properly, you got to focus on what you're good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just because I know how to run a trial, that doesn't mean I know anything about, SEO, marketing, and what do they call it? Optimization and all that kind of stuff. And so I hire people who know about that stuff to do it. And it's worth the money because they know how to do it. I don't. And if I want to spend my time learning how to do it, that's time I can't be doing the stuff that I'm good at.
You're already a busy guy. So you don't want to add another tier to that busy life, right?
Exactly. And the old way of doing it. Okay, so when I first started practicing law, lawyers were not allowed to advertise.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it was considered, I'm going to use the modern term, uncool. Believe me, trust me. There's no way the legal establishment would not want you to have something to do that was uncool. But it was actually probably too cool, maybe would be a better way. It was too newfangled. And, the legal profession is not supposed to be like shoe salesman and that sort of thing.
Really?
Yeah. And then they first brought it back. It was very, very limited. Yellow page ads, and then lawyers started taking out full page. When I say yellow pages, do you know what I'm talking about?
I absolutely do. Most of you guys are wondering what this is. Google it.
Yeah, a big book with phone numbers in it and ads, and that's the way people used to find.
Or you could use them as like steps for your. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, but can you imagine that before they at least let yellow page advertising, the only thing you could do is put your name in a phone book.
So people looking for a lawyer would have to look at a name and say, I think I like his name.
Yeah.
And go with that.
Yeah, that seems like a good name.
That sounds good.
Yeah, and you couldn't even do Google reviews or anything like that.
Yeah.
All you could do is does anybody know this guy? And
it would be all referrals then, basically.
Yeah, and that's the way it was really started.
Times have definitely changed, and especially when it comes to that. I've noticed now that I've seen some of these newer law offices actually go into like almost like a 180 when you compare it to back in the day.
Yeah.
They're open space. Nobody really has to wear a suit and tie. It's a different environment that people are trying to bring into their I guess they're trying to do a life-work balance.
Yeah.
What's your view on that? That you've started, back in the day where, like you're saying, you could only have a name on Yellow Pages, to what's happening now. What are your views on that?
I think it's better that people feel more comfortable with their lawyer, because that person, the lawyer, is going to, especially with the kind of work I do, they are guiding someone through an intensely stressful and difficult time in their lives. Probably the most, obviously, if we're talking about career criminals, that's another story.
Yeah.
But for the vast majority of people who come into contact with the justice system at all, like people who get sued for the first time after however many years, when that time is so difficult, and the idea that you go into some office and it's all done and you sit on furniture you could never afford, and it's mahogany walls that you could never afford you've never been in a place that has all that, and it's this rare and purified air, and you don't feel comfortable at all. And for a while I was on Bay Street, and I thought, I'm going to have this fancy office on Bay Street. People are going to be able to look out the window and see my amazing view. That was the goal back then, right? That was the goal back then. And
the corner office.
Yeah. And especially big windows on the 25th floor at least, and all that kind of thing. And then I moved. I'm in a really funky spot near Spadina and Queen. And
so you're with the cool kids now.
I'm with the cool kids now, exactly. And I found my clients were way more comfortable than when I was on Bay Street.
Yeah.
It's just, they just prefer it.
And I totally understand it, because I think the whole perception of a lawyer back in the day was, you'd almost be afraid to talk to a lawyer. Yeah. It was like there was this fear that was put towards everyone else. Like, oh no, he's a lawyer. We got to be careful what we say around him. Like,
yeah.
It was this thing, and yet the lawyer's there to help you, not to make you uncomfortable.
No,
right?
it's to advance your interests in a system where virtually everybody else is out to get them.
Literally.
Yeah, literally.
Literally.
And the only person they have on their side, especially in a criminal case, especially in a very serious criminal case, is their defense lawyer.
Yeah.
The prosecutors, the police, often the judge. There is just this scary, I guess, for lack of a better term, situation that people are in.
So looking back, would you have done the same thing? Would you have started the company right away? Or if you could talk to Lorne when he was a young guy, what would be the little bits and points of advice you would give him?
The first thing I would say is go and back to school.
Okay.
And take a business course.
Ah.
And learn about business.
See? Okay. Boys and girls, learn.
Yes, absolutely. Because those people who had at least some business background, the whole concept of commercial law, and hence white collar crime, is something that you don't know. In order to understand business crime, you have to understand business.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Okay. And that wasn't my background. My background, as you heard, was social activism and joining demonstrations and power to the people and all that kind of thing. That not only would not help me to represent people charged with embezzlement and big banks and stuff, but when I eventually got into some litigation work, you got to understand how business works to understand what may have gone wrong here.
Absolutely. Makes total sense.
So learn more. And the other thing I would say to anybody starting out in a profession is find people who've run a business and speak to them about the nuts and bolts part of doing it. Because you can be the best architect, lawyer, accountant, whatever it is. If you don't know how to run a business, you're just going to lose so much money.
And what I usually tell the younger crowd as well is don't be afraid to ask that person to go out for a lunch or for a dinner.
Yep.
You'd be surprised. You know, when you run a business for so many years, you're kind of proud to say and to tell your story as like, this is how I started. This is what I went through. This is what's going on. This is what I did. You know, there is that little bit of, I guess you can call it pride to talk about what you've done and what you've accomplished and talk a little bit about what went wrong.
Yeah.
And those are the things that as a young entrepreneur, you'll learn so much. You'll avoid so many of these little issues.
By talking to people.
Yeah.
The other thing we talked about was hire professionals whenever you can.
Yes.
You know, your bookkeepers and accountants and all those sorts of people. You're going to need those on your team. And you know, earlier I said full-time, but not full-time in the sense of, you know, they've got an office in yours where they're there every day from 9 to 5, but just someone who you pay on an hourly basis to take care of your other things. The other, I think, people that is really important to speak to is more senior professionals. Mm-hmm. So in my case, lawyers. So I wish I had more of an opportunity to spend more time talking to lawyers who'd been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
When I was doing it for 1 or 2, and say, this is how you try and protect yourself against the client who, you know, you get your name on the record and then the client runs out of money or the client stops paying you. They're not always do the same thing, by the way.
There's a little difference.
There's a little difference there. And, you know, you want to be able to get that experience about, you know, there's the old adage in law, and, you know, get your money up front. Yeah. And it really, really does apply. But there's other steps you can take. And there's way more advantages now that didn't exist when I first started.
Yeah.
When I first started, you couldn't take credit cards.
Really? I was going to ask, do you think technology is actually helping your field?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So now, instead of begging that someone comes and drops by a check and half the time the check bounces anyways, you can get a credit card profile. You're able to just phone and get authorization to take more money off the credit card we have on file. There's, if they can't get down to your office, which for 3 years people couldn't anyways at all.
That was an issue, yeah, for sure.
We've got Interact transfers now. Most of our retainers we take either by credit card or by Interact transfer.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare that some guy comes in and hands me a bunch of cash.
I know it's one of the benefits of, well, I'm not going to want to paint the pandemic as being a good thing, but you know, some good things come out of bad situations. And I think that was one of them, where technology, all of these bits and parts of technology already existed, but we were like, you know, let's keep living the same style. And then it made us have to, okay, we can't see you face to face. So we have to use the technology to make payments, or let's try a Zoom call. And, you know, I feel like in that sense, it was good that it happened to kind of like push people into starting to use technology better.
Right. And you can't be left behind on any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, I told you about the days when all you could do was list your name in the phone book, and that was and then advertising come along. And then the problem is, if you're not the one doing the advertising, but everybody else is, people are finding them. Yeah. And, you know, there are some law firms that like to put their names and pictures on the sides of buses and things like that. Something I have found judges are not that fond of, by the way, because I think they consider it a bit crass. But the one thing you cannot avoid is you need to know how to use the internet and Google to your advantage. And that's
what I say, people. Just Google it out.
Yeah, you have to. And don't be afraid when you have a client who's saying, oh my God, you did a great job for me. Can you give us a 5-star review on Google? Yeah. Because that thing counts so much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because if I'm the next guy and I'm searching and I find your company, I'm going to want to see what the reviews were from the last one.
Yeah. Now it's a bit of a difficult thing for the kind of people I serve, because like, who wants to use their real name and say, yeah, you know, I got stung for that bank heist, and Sabsay got me off. You know, they may not want people to know that they were but they, you know, you can use pseudonyms, of course, or you don't have to say what I did for you. Just the level of service.
Yeah, exactly.
And some people will do that. You know, if you Google Sabsay Lawyers, which you all should, and you see the reviews of people who just said things about their experience with us without saying this was a murder beef or this was a theft or this was a fraud. Or
you don't need to get into the details, people.
No,
just leave a nice review. That's all you got to do.
Just talk about the service. Yeah, exactly.
So 35 years, you're still going strong.
Yep.
You're going to continue doing this. This is something that you're still passionate about?
Until they take this briefcase from my cold, dying hands.
And that will be tough.
Yeah.
You've got a good grip there.
Yes. Grips is very, very important given the other stuff that I do.
Exactly. Well, since we're talking about grips, let's get into the other stuff as well. Another big part of your life, I think it's a big part of your life because I believe you practice it almost every day, martial arts.
Yeah. So I'm a 5th degree black belt in karate and a Shihan level instructor. So I both train and teach in karate, and I've got a purple belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So my regular week, not now because I just came out of hernia surgery, so I'm taking a bit of a break, which is driving me nuts. But once another week or two, and I should be good to get back into it. But it's at least 3 times, if not 4 or 5 days a week during the day doing jiu-jitsu, and 3 or 4 days at nights doing karate.
Yes, you had mentioned this to me before at our dojo in karate, and it just baffled me. Like, wow. But you know what? It's all about getting used to it, right? It's getting your body to that level and body and mind, because you gotta really have to be focused to really push yourself to do that.
Yeah, and you need the discipline to keep it up and to say, Mondays at 10 o'clock, I do this.
Yes.
And I even scheduled trials and stuff around that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, sometimes I can't. It's like a 2-week trial in front of a jury. I can't reschedule. But, you know, if a judge says to me, you know, Mr. Sabsay, what day of the week next week? I'm not going to pick the day I have a private jiu-jitsu lesson or a class. You know, I'm going to pick one of the days that I don't do one.
Yeah, you work around that. Yeah, absolutely. I do the same thing. I try as much to do the same thing. How long have you started? Did you start? Or what did you start first?
I started karate first.
Karate first, okay.
And that would have been back in the 70s, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we go way back here. So back in those days, there were 2 things that made me really want to get into it. One of them, there was a series called Kung Fu. Now, Kung Fu has been remade I think more than once, but this is the original Kung Fu with David Carradine, and I was just totally blown away by
that's the one, the calmest guy on TV, right? He was always so calm.
Very, very calm, and then all of a sudden, some cowboy would want to attack some poor Chinese old man, and boom! The next thing you know, the fists and the thing. That was really great, and I thought, I want to be like that guy, you know? And then the other one was the movie Billy Jack with Tom Laughlin, which is a great movie. Goes back very early 70s, I think.
Oh, wow. I don't think I've watched that one yet.
Yeah, you got to see it.
Okay.
So he was doing Hapkido and just great scenes. And the great thing about that movie is because I was really into, you know, social activism and social justice, he plays a Native American who is defending Native Americans against right-wing racist types in a southern town.
Yeah.
So it appealed to me in so many ways. It's like, you know, crusader guy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be like that guy. So I was looking around. The only place I could find any thing to do was the Y.
Yeah.
So I did some lessons, some general self-defense. And there was a guy who at that time was the youngest black belt in Canada. He was 14 years old. He may have been the only one, just 1 or 2, but it's not like now. Now we have tons of 14-year-old black belts, but back then we didn't. Anyhow, he came to the Y and he taught a karate course. And his father came up to me one day and he said, "You don't belong here. You belong in a real karate club."
Interesting.
And I said, okay, I'll look around. And I joined the Higashi club. So the Higashi club, the main one was, I think, Eglinton near Laird or something like that. But they had an offshoot that eventually became Willowdale Karate. So I joined there because it was close to me. They were near the Shepherd and the 401.
Okay. How old were you at that time?
13.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 12, 13, something like that. And so I started going to the Higashi. And as my parents used to drive by that intersection, because I lived at the time at Bayview and Finch. But if they would ever come off the 401 at Shepherd, I would see this place. And there was this big poster on the side, and it said rigorous training. See, now that I'm in my 60s, the rigorous part is something that do we really have to? But when you're like 13 or 14, you want to be as rigorous as possible. So that really appealed to me. Yeah. So I joined that karate club and I stayed with that with them for many years. They left the Higashi sort of thing, and then, as I say, became Willowdale Karate. And I was there, and then I went to U of T. I joined the U of T Karate Club. And I did that for a while, and then I stopped.
Oh.
When I went to law school.
Okay.
I didn't do any karate at all. And
was that just the overload of?
Yeah, I just thought it was too much.
Okay.
I really had to concentrate on my studies and stuff.
Yeah.
Now I'd do it different. I'd carve out the time no matter what.
How long did you take off?
18 years.
Oh, that's a pretty bit.
Yeah, long time. And the other thing is I have psoriatic arthritis, which you get arthritis like in your toes and your fingers. So it's not hips and knees and stuff, but it can still be very debilitating in terms of martial arts because, you hit something with an arthritic finger and it really, really, really hurts. So I didn't think I could do karate. I wanted to, but my daughter, who I know you know, when she was 14, she got interested in karate. So we looked around. We decided on Northern Karate, and I started taking her to lessons there. And I would sit there with the other parents. And the more I went, the more I was thinking, why am I sitting here? I'd rather be in there with her. So I joined. And
so did you have to relearn everything again, or you still had a lot of knowledge still in you?
I remember, so Hanshi Burkowski, he gave me a little mini assessment. Mm-hmm. So I came in, I wore gi, and I did some turns and stuff like that. And it was amazing. It was like riding a bicycle, right? Yeah. Like they say, that a lot of it just kept with me. And he said, well, you could be either orange or green belt level. And he set me up with now Kiyoshi Vince.
Yes.
And he looked at my kicks and punches and stuff, and he gave me an orange belt. And so I started at Northern Karate with an orange belt.
With an orange belt?
Yeah.
All right. So you didn't go through the phase of the white gis and all of that, right?
No. And even when I went to jiu-jitsu, when I started in jiu-jitsu, a lot of people are white belts in jiu-jitsu for years.
Yeah.
I know a guy who was a white belt for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
You know?
So how many belts does jiu-jitsu have?
Okay, so it's white, blue, purple, brown, black.
Okay.
And it takes a long, long time between belts.
Okay.
And it's because it's very different. The nature of the training is different. Mm-hmm. You know, as I went up the ranks in karate, I had to perfect a kata, or I had to perfect my technique. Better punch, better kick, better whatever. Jiu-jitsu is so different because it is a martial art that cannot be done without actually fighting.
Yeah, because you can't really practice on your own.
You can't practice on your own. It's like you can practice a kata on your own. You can practice your kicks, your punches, all that sort of stuff you can do on your own. But you can't escape a kazagatame on your own. You need some guy to put you in the kazagatame first, you know?
They haven't figured that part out yet.
Yeah, that's
right?
very, very difficult. During the pandemic, I bought a grappling dummy.
Oh boy.
But the thing is, and you can try and learn techniques and try and learn, but the dummy doesn't fight back.
Exactly. And if somebody's filming you with that, they have some things that they can use against you.
Yes, yeah.
I'm just guessing.
If you've got the wrong kind of, the wrong kind of dummy. But I realized during the pandemic, actually, just how much you need the force of the other person.
Oh, absolutely. Even in karate, like when we went through the pandemic, they were doing their best teaching us through Zoom, and even the self-defense moves. I was getting so confused because imagine this and imagine that. Like you can't, one thing is imagining, the other thing is actually holding on to someone. Yeah. It's so different. Like you can't, it's hard.
It's really hard. Now, I'll tell you a story about that. So one day, I'm in the dojo, the karate dojo, and we have a lot of people on Zoom. And young Vince was teaching a self-defense thing, but he's got to use an imaginary opponent. And I don't know, I said something about, don't you think you should do it this way or that way or whatever? So he said, okay, you do it. So I go up and do it. And it was self-defense number, or I don't know, the one where you put your knee on the guy and you put him down. And so, I step aside, I do the punch, I all on my imaginary friend here, my imaginary attacker. And then I sort of put the guy down, and I'm about to give him a knee strike. And Kiyoshi Vince says to me, Lorne, he's over there. And I'm thinking, maybe your guy's over there. My guy's right here. How did he get over there? Yeah. In my mind, he never got over there. But that's sometimes how silly it got.
Yeah, it was really, for me, it was really difficult. And sometimes I was lucky enough that I had my daughter with me and my son, so we would kind of practice together, and that helped a lot. Yeah. But it's still not the same thing because now there's a height and strength difference as well, which counts a lot too. Yeah. Right. When you're going against someone that's your own, more or less your height and weight is very different than grabbing a 11-year-old at the time.
Especially different.
It just doesn't work, right?
Especially when you get into any grappling, jiu-jitsu-y kind of thing. Yeah.
But the levels, you were saying about the levels in jiu-jitsu. Yes. So how does it work to go from belt to belt? Is that something that decision has to be made by your sensei? Okay.
Yeah. At least in the academies that I've been involved with.
Okay.
The senseis, or professor as they're called, because it's Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So although it originally comes from Japanese judo, it's different than Japanese jiu-jitsu, and there are different systems. The Japanese jiu-jitsu system is very close to what we're used to in karate because it's Japanese and it's derived from that same sort of background. But with Brazilian jiu-jitsu, you got to show up a lot. It helps if you can compete, just because that's the only way you can truly test yourself. Yeah.
Because I'm guessing if you're always grappling with the same people,
you get to know their tricks and they get to know yours.
Okay. Yeah. That's why.
And that's the issue.
Makes total sense.
And when you compete, you all of a sudden, every time I've competed, and I've had a fairly good handle on the way my fellow students in my dojo tend to act. Yeah. Oh, I'm with this guy. He's going to try and get me in a DARS. Oh, that guy loves the collar chokes. You start to learn what people like, and you've trained certain techniques.
You're kind of anticipating, right?
Yeah. Then you get with somebody you've never met before.
It's an open book.
And all of a sudden they start doing stuff, and you're like, no one at our club does that, Yeah. And I think that's the biggest benefit, is all of a sudden have to deal with the unknown, because ultimately these things are martial arts, not sports, although we do make sports out of them. Yes. We've got point sparring in the karate world, and of course there's a point system in jiu-jitsu too, in competition. But in reality, you have to know how to expect the unexpected, whether it's close combat in the form of jiu-jitsu, or whether it's a medium combat in the form of karate and Muay Thai and other striking arts, or whether it's more of a distance if you're talking about Kabuto, if you're talking about weapons. Yeah. And how to use. Each one is better depending on the distance between you and your opponent.
Cafe Brasiliano, where the coffee is truly amazing, but that's not all they have to offer. Their sandwiches will make your taste buds dance. Every bite is packed with flavor and freshness. Trust me on this one. The vintage style of this place isn't just limited to the decor. They even have a marketplace of quality products that you can browse while you're enjoying your coffee. Perfect to meet your friends or make new ones. Cafe Brasiliano is the perfect place for coffee sandwiches and a unique shopping experience. If you're in Toronto, don't forget to swing by at 80 Miller Street. What's your favorite thing about karate? What's your favorite thing about jiu-jitsu?
I'll start with jiu-jitsu first. The thing I really love about it is that you learn a bunch of techniques and then you actually fight with people and none of them work. And the reason why that's a good thing though is because you have to learn to make something work when the person you're fighting with is doing everything possible to stop you from being able to do it.
Right.
And it's very frustrating at first, but eventually what starts happening is you start seeing patterns and things, and also you have to go all out. See, if we went all out in karate, we'd all end up in the hospital every week because you can't strike someone full force and expect that they're going to survive, or at least be in really good shape, unless they're super, super tough, and that only lasts so long, right? Whereas in jiu-jitsu, because you can tap out before an arm is broken and stuff, you can tap. So you can go full on hard and really test yourself and really test your technique without it becoming fatal or near fatal, because you've always got the tap.
You just tap out.
You know, before my wrist is going to be broken or my neck is going to be broken or my arm is going to be broken.
Yeah, don't be a hero, people. Tap out.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's really it's really, really important that you do. And it's also vast. So when I am sparring in karate, my mind is really focused on, can I see an opening to get in, or can I produce an opening? You know, the fake,
the fake,
you know, back fist fake, you know, whatever like that. Here, kick, whatever. In jiu-jitsu, I have no idea what's happening. I could be on the top. I could be on the bottom. I have to escape from the bottom. I have to try and hold the guy down from the top. An omoplata looks good here, and there's a potential armbar, but oh no, the guy's choking me. So you are constantly have your mind and your body alive.
Wow. It seems like fun. I've been very curious about it. I just don't think at this point I'm going to adventure into it. I'm going to probably just stick to karate at this point, but it was always something. I wish I was 10 years younger. If I was 10 years younger, I would probably get into it.
Yeah, or if you were 10 years older like me.
Well, but you've been doing it now for how long have you been doing jiu-jitsu?
Jiu-jitsu for 5 years.
Oh, 5 years. I thought you've been doing it for longer.
No. Well, okay, so
now you're making me double think about this because carry the floor.
That I'm too old stuff is never going to work around me.
Yeah.
One of the reasons I started learning about jiu-jitsu, well, as you know, Japanese jiu-jitsu is part of our program at Northern Karate, but not as much Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So not as much like on the ground kind of stuff.
Yes.
And I don't know if you were with us or not when we first started the combat, what we called combat veritas. So true combat. Okay. And this was Hanshi Borkowski's idea. And to learn, basically to teach MMA. Mm-hmm. Okay. And he started teaching, and now Kiyoshi Dom used to teach, and they would alternate. And then Dom got his own club, and one day Hanshi walks in and he says, Lorne, you're now the other guy in charge of this. Just like that. And so, because I used to come to the classes, I was really interested, and I really loved the grappling stuff. Like I really, really did. And so he puts me in charge of this program, and I go, look, I need some resources. I'm not trained in this kind of thing. And Hanshi gave me a bunch of books and things that I could go. So I was learning things on books and videotapes and trying to bring them into the class. I mean, the striking part I could do no problem because that's what we train all the time.
Yeah.
But the on the grappling side, it was a real learning curve. And then I had an opportunity to take some free classes at Toronto BJJ. And I thought, so this is how it's really done. and so when I say I've been doing this 5 years, I've been 5 years with Toronto
officially,
BJJ. But I was learning and trying to incorporate into my MMA program jiu-jitsu even before that for a number of years, like 5, 6, 7, which is why, whereas most people are white belts for years, I was a white belt for 6 months.
Yeah.
And then I got promoted to blue, and now I've been promoted to purple. And the problem is, you never think you're getting better, at least. And it's not just me who thinks that. It's generally people will talk to you.
Because I guess the more you learn, the more you realize you need to learn more.
Yeah. And here's the thing.
It's one of those weird things.
Even if you're getting better, all of those people who come to class with you, they're getting better too.
Exactly. Like I feel like that in karate. Like I still feel like I'm a white belt. Like I go to our classes and you see the higher ranking black belts and I'm like, oh my God, will I ever do that? And it's like,
and you will.
You still feel like, is it okay to come in? Sorry.
Yeah.
But it's, it's what you were saying just before. It's showing up and it's, it's being present and trying your best. That's what I try to do. But,
well, that's, the showing up and the doing it part.
Yeah.
Is, we started off talking about law and opening a law practice. And I mentioned how being in law school and learning the theory and running a law firm and even being a lawyer are two different things. And you got to go through trials and make the mistakes that you're going to make.
Exactly.
In order to get good at your game. You can't get good just by reading books about how to be good, right?
Has martial arts made you a better lawyer?
Yeah, 100%. Because I have learned things through martial arts that I actually take in. So you may know that our sensei says to us all the time, do nothing of no use. And that comes from Miyamoto Musashi, the famous samurai, who one of his precepts was just that, do nothing of no use. And I teach advocacy too, to younger lawyers. And I'm always quoting that. Because when you see a first-year lawyer get up and they have this witness there and they have this whole script of questions and they're not getting anywhere with the witness because they don't understand yet, they will, but they don't understand that a successful cross-examination is not I'm going to ask the questions that you will have no choice but to answer the way I want you to.
It's not a question and answer,
It's a dialogue. It's a dialogue. There's a guy named Roger Dodd who's a really great teacher in advocacy, especially cross-examination. And he said, we often ask law students or lawyers, what are you paid for? And the most common answer that they will give is, I'm paid to talk. Right, you go to court and you make submissions and you ask questions, you're paid to talk. And he goes, no, you're paid to listen. Uh-huh. And my own cross-examination got better when I stopped looking at my script and I started listening more to what the witness was saying to me. And therefore, my attacks and my counterattacks, to use that analogy with martial arts, became much, much better because I could see the witness going down a path. And either I do want to go down that path with them, in which case I follow them, or I need to change the subject because I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
But you don't learn that unless you've got feedback. And it's the same thing. We were talking about jiu-jitsu and how impossible it was to do, to learn on Zoom during because you need that other person fighting against you. And it's like karate sparring. The two lessons are, one, do nothing of no use. So don't just start throwing kicks and wild punches and things like that aren't going to land and do anything for you. All it's going to do is make you tired.
Yes.
Right? So you have to only do things that you work into your plan and that you want to do in the fight that you're in. Okay? And so that's the do nothing of no use thing. The you're paid to listen thing is you got to find out where your opponent's weaknesses are. Are they better? Are they a ground player? Are they better underneath? They've got a really good guard game, for example.
So you kind of need to let them go loose a little bit so you figure them out. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, or you test the waters.
Yeah.
I'm going to do low roundhouse kicks and see what he does. See what he does.
Uh-huh.
Does he move back? Does he try and block?
Is he ready for it? Is he
yeah,
not? Like,
if I do certain things and he raises his hands, okay, so now I can get underneath. But you have to have that dialogue. And it's especially important. My professor in jiu-jitsu refers to it as map questing the guy, where you have to see, what can I do to make him go in a certain direction? It was funny when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, I didn't really look at the signs on the wall, but I was just talking about karate and sparring in karate generally. And I was saying, you know, honestly, I don't know. A lot of times when I get a good point, it's just pure luck. I go, but you know, the thing is, it seems that the more I train, the luckier I get. And he points to the wall, and I hadn't seen it until that moment. That's exactly what it says on the wall at Toronto Beach. It says, the more I train, the luckier I get.
yeah, it's true.
And it's true. And you think it's just luck, but it isn't. It's that you've really trained, you've really gotten into that communication with your opponent.
Yeah.
And you're feeding off that, and it's giving you ideas for attacks and counterattacks and escapes and all the rest of it.
Yeah, we learn a lot of that in karate, you know, like letting your guard up so that you want someone to attack you at that certain point so that you can then do what you need to do,
Exactly.
right? So it's all about really inviting people in. That's what Hanchi always says, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And you get into a situation where I remember Kiyoshi Vince saying in a class once, the thing about sparring is not, I've got the fastest front kick, so I'm just going to get in with that, or I've got the fastest side kick.
That's all you do.
Yeah, exactly. But he said it's about seeing the opening or making the opening.
Making the opening.
So if I want a body shot with a reverse punch, if I just come in, you're going to see it coming and you're going to block it, and that's going to be the end of it. But if I start by even faking high to bring your hands up because you want to block this, then I can come in underneath.
I'm just telling you, here I am.
Yeah.
Here we go.
But it takes years to develop that.
Well, to do it instinctively.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I was talking to Ricky, Sensei Ricky. He was here last week, and we were talking about that. It's the repetition. It's the doing things over and over and over until it just becomes just a natural reaction.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That takes time.
And it takes time. And I find it takes, in karate, what I used to come, there was a time when we used to have sparring every Friday night.
Yeah.
And I would come to as many of those as I possibly could. Not necessarily because, I like sparring more than kata or more than this or more than that. It's that you got to practice it. You can't get better by not practicing it.
So I guess we got to the answer of what you like most about karate. Is it sparring? Or do you have another love there?
Karate, I really enjoy sparring because it's the closest you're going to get to using karate in a real situation. But on the other hand, I love the tradition that comes across in the kata. I get this feeling sometimes when I'm doing certain katas that I'm doing something that somebody 300-400 years ago was doing this. And being part of that tradition.
You're back in Japan.
Yeah. Even though I've never been there.
Yeah. But you probably will be because you're someone that
actually,
loves to travel.
Next summer I'm.
There you go.
Yeah. That's something I want to do. But the practice of the training thing is so hard, even when you don't want to do it. And I don't always want to do it. Trust me.
You got to push yourself.
Yeah, you got to push yourself. I mean, there are times you're tired. You were up all night last night because of a case that you couldn't get out of your head. And
you're just not feeling it. You're human. I mean, we all go through those phases, right? Where some days we wake up and we want to just take over the world, and other days we just want to relax a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And just chill out a little bit.
Yep.
One of the things that I know you like to do to chill out is traveling.
Yeah.
You've already mentioned a few of the places you've been, but is that something that you enjoy to do, like traveling the world?
It is. People have various things they want to do when they earn a living. A lot of the times, just like in karate and jiu-jitsu, it's a matter of survival. You're not necessarily good on the offense, but it's just a survival thing. And people live paycheck to paycheck. Yeah. If you have the luxury not to have to do that, other people, they want a bigger house, they want a better car. My thing is travel. I literally work to be able to travel.
Amazing. So off the top of your head, how many countries or how many different places have you been already? A rough guess.
It's easily got to be between 12 and 15.
And when you decide to travel to a country, what's the thing that attracts you to go to that country? What are you looking for when you're looking for a new place, the next place to go to?
Right.
Is it tradition? Is it what do you love?
I think for me, it's the chance to experience something that is different from what I experience day-to-day life. And sometimes, because of the state of the world, you have to time these things very carefully if you're going to do them at all. So, for example, for a number of years, I was going to various countries in Southeast Asia, starting with Thailand, and then I went to Cambodia, and then I went to Laos and Vietnam. And during the time that I was doing that and going to those countries, I had always wanted to go to Burma, also known as Myanmar. And I couldn't because the military dictatorship there was such that it was just too dangerous to go to. And you were only supporting the military by being there. And then because of Aung San Suu Kyi and the liberalization that we had before the coup 2 years ago, there was like a window. And I was able to climb through that window, and I was able to see Burma and photograph it for what may be the only time in my life, or maybe from this point on in anybody's life. Because, of course, now it's civil war there, and I just don't have the option. I have, sometimes it's a moment in history. I was in Nicaragua during the Sandinista Revolution when I was in law school.
Oh, wow.
And so, that was a very, very exciting thing, and a thing that is, to me, more important than acquiring a bigger car or a bigger house or anything, to have that experience.
No, I think that's amazing. And you touched a little bit on photography there, and I know you're also a photographer. This man does everything. We're gonna be here for another 3 hours.
A while, hey? We're gonna have to talk.
We're gonna be here for quite a while.
Yeah.
But when did photography start being a passion?
When I was in junior high, what now we would call middle school. But when I went, it was called junior highs.
So you're the time of the film and going into that black room. Did you develop anything?
Yes.
Did you get into that as well?
We used to have a joke. Hi, honey, let's go into the dark room and see what develops. But yeah, so I've done that, and I used to do that, and I used to have a Pentax Spot-O-Matic camera, and with film and that, and then I kind of lucked into digital photography because I had a really cheap digital camera, and my house got broken into, and the thieves only got a couple things. They got a Sony video camera that didn't work anymore. They got a pair of binoculars that I actually won in some contest, and they got that camera, that digital camera. And the insurance said, well, we'll pay for something comparable. And I think it was Minolta, but they'd gone out of business. They'd been bought out by Sony. So the closest thing I could get was a Sony Alpha 100, which was the first really good digital SLR that I could get hands on it. And then things just took off. Yeah,
things definitely changed. I know at that time, the purists were very much against the whole digital transformation of photography. And I kind of understand them at that point because cameras weren't doing what cameras do nowadays, right? But that was the beginning. And I kind of saw that was going to be, it was going to be big. Yeah. I was fortunate enough to also start into digital photography when it kind of began as well. And it's been amazing to see how much cameras have evolved and how much the technology has evolved. And I still think that it's not taking away from the art.
No, not at all. No. Not at all. You can, and also because you can do so many more things post-production with Lightroom and Photoshop and similar programs. The creative moment is, hitting the shutter is only one part of it.
It's one step. The other,
Yeah.
I feel like, and I don't know if you agree with me, but I feel like using Lightroom or Photoshop with your picture is really putting your flavor into it.
Exactly. So you've seen some of my photography, and some of it I try and make it as realistic as possible, and I'll correct for white balance and color and all these things to make it look like this is what I saw in my hand. But sometimes I want to, like you say, put your own stamp on it, and you want to change things. So like Picasso, I'm seeing different things here than just, what the image happens to really be.
Yeah.
I'm seeing it's conveying more color or different color to me that I can add post-production, but really helps. I can turn it black and white because for some reason I think that the texture is going to be more prominent in black and white than it will be in color.
Absolutely. I really enjoy a black and white picture. I think done properly, if it's composed properly, it can become a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And it can really be even more like so dramatic.
Dramatic. Yeah, exactly. I was thinking about that. It can really bring out the essence of that picture.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So being a photographer and being able to travel around the world, how's that been?
Fabulous. Absolutely fabulous. Now it gets expensive because certain kinds of travel lend themselves to certain kinds of equipment that works best. So for example, my last trip was to South Africa.
Okay, so now you're bringing I'm
bringing
lens.
a big guy. And one day I didn't have the big one with me because it was raining and I was worried about it getting wet. And so I had my smaller, I had my 75 to 200 I was using, whereas the big one goes to 500, maybe even 550. So to get closer to the animals is more difficult. You have to get physically close to the animals on safari.
And some of those animals you don't want to get that close to.
Well, exactly. So the day that it was raining and I didn't have my longer camera, I had the fortune of just seeing the tail end of a leopard kill.
Oh wow!
And on an impala, and I have a picture of that. Because what happened was, and this is the trackers and the guides that take you out on safaris there are just, and I'm sure it's the same in Botswana or Kenya or any of these other places that do this sort of thing. But seeing leopards is very rare. I have a friend of mine I was just speaking to this week who was born in South Africa, has never seen a leopard. Okay. Wow. Even though they live there. And what happened was we're driving along and the impala are making noises that our guides interpret as alarm calls. They know that there is a predator nearby.
So they alert each other with that
So
sound,
yes, and they're looking all in the same direction. So we go in that direction and we sort of come over this little hillock kind of thing. And all of a sudden this leopard springs out and runs away because of us.
Yeah.
And then this impala stands up, clearly wounded, and starts staggering. And we don't want to prolong its agony, right? So we decide we're going to leave. The leopard will come back, finish his job, and we'll circle around and come back later.
Let nature do its thing.
And let nature do its thing. And we did, and we found the leopard had come back to where we last were, taken the impala, dragged it under a tree, and we saw him chowing down.
Oh wow. That's quite a sight.
It really is. It's really amazing. The other truly, truly amazing thing that I saw is a white rhino, a mother and her calf. And we were actually on our way because the rangers will radio each other.
Okay.
And we had heard reports that another leopard had just finished a meal and was therefore sleeping beside its kill and therefore wasn't going anywhere, so you could come and see it. But it was almost like taking a number, is your turn up?
Really?
So as we were driving toward this leopard, we spotted very briefly, like behind some trees, a couple of rhinos. And so we go to see the leopard, we find out our number is not up yet. So we said, we're going to go back and try and see those rhinos.
Yeah.
And I saw these two, they came out and then they kind of go off into the sunset. And it's absolutely beautiful. And I'm reading a book right now called The Rhino Conspiracy by Peter Hain. And it's about rhino horn poaching and how it's just devastated. Like the numbers are from 85,000 rhinos in South Africa to like 3,000. Like that's how many have been killed.
That's insane.
Due to poaching. So I recently put up on some of the media places where I put my photographs, a picture of a rhino. And I said, you know, in 5 years, the only way you're going to see a picture like this is because it's going to be AI.
Yeah.
It won't be real because they'll be gone.
That's so sad.
It really is.
And there's no way that they can control this. I mean, it's almost impossible.
The problem is that there's so much government corruption actually involved in the trade.
Yeah.
That it's difficult to stop when there are powers that be that want it to continue.
Well, they benefit from it too. Well, benefit in terms of money.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Because it's very, very valuable. So in the case of rhino horns, it's just keratin. It's fingernails. It's all it is. But these myths that it is the cure-all, it'll cure cancer, it'll cure your sexual potency in places like China and Vietnam.
Yeah.
That's where the big market is for the rhino horns. And of course the poachers they'll shoot the rhino, and whether it's totally dead or not, they'll just hack the horn off it. It's really, really, really nasty. But they fetch higher prices than cocaine and heroin do.
The world has a problem.
Yeah.
And we need to fix this, but I don't know how.
It's difficult. In South Africa, in Kruger, which is the largest, I think it may be the largest kind of wildlife, definitely in South Africa, maybe even in Southern Africa. I really don't, I'm not sure, but it's a war. And it's a war fought with drones and AK-47s and this sort of thing. When I was taking the video of these two rhinos, the guide said, look, if you post that on social media, make sure there's no location coordinates on your thing. And so before I post anything, I look through everything and make sure there's no location data.
Really?
Because the poachers will look for that, try and find the very animals that I photographed just so they can kill them and take their horns.
It's insane. Using technology for that it's criminal.
Yeah. And they have to use technology to combat them. And it's just like internet fraud. For every new security measure we come up with, the other side comes up with ways to get it around it. But another book, I haven't read it yet, but I bought it when I was in South Africa. It was about an ex-military guy there who has turned the Rangers into a paramilitary force. Because they have to be. They have to be to fight, because it's organized crime. And they have to take these measures and do this kind of training to try and keep up with these guys.
It's sad that we still live in a world like this, but what are we going to do? Yeah.
Well, what we're going to do is at least photograph it.
Yeah, at least that.
And that's what I try and do is, you know, if you hear, we don't hear nearly enough about what's happening in Myanmar right now, but it is truly, truly awful. And I at least got to go there and photograph the society that is being decimated there now by a corrupt military. Yeah. So at least people can look at my picture. Why is this country worth saving? All countries are worth saving, but at least I can show images.
Exactly.
To show people this is the society that is now at war. Yeah. You know, and it would have been like people who would have, photographers who would have taken pictures in Ukraine.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's pretty clear right now that those pictures are, at least in the short term, going to be the only visual symbol of what
they'll definitely be
a non-destroyed Ukraine looks like, right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
And you've won a couple of awards with these adventures of yours, right?
I have. I've won some related to National Geographic Group, and I won one of my pictures that I took in which was a black and white, which I turned into a black and white. There was a contest put out by the safari camp that I went to, and I won with that image.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll probably put it up here for people to see.
Okay, good. I hope you will.
And we'll definitely have all the links for that where you have your pictures and all that.
Okay,
for people
great.
To go check out and hopefully inspire other photographers out there. It's definitely inspiring me. I've always said I've been an amateur photographer for all my life, but I think everybody's an amateur photographer at a certain point until. Yeah. I think professional photographers are the ones that just live from photography. That's the only
you make your living from it. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you don't love it as less or more than the other guy. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
No, I still love photography. It's something that I wish I had more time, or rather, I think I have to organize my life a little bit better so that I can have more time to take pictures.
It's, all these things that I've been talking about stuff that I do. How do I do them? I also have a wife and 2 boys and all that stuff, and a daughter from a previous relationship, but she's old enough that she can take care of herself. But I carve out this time. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday at a certain time, I go to Toronto BJJ. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at a certain time, I go to karate. And with rare exceptions, I'm there. Friday nights, with rare exceptions, I edit the photography that I did in other countries.
Yeah.
Every Friday night. And
that's something I have to start doing.
That's what you got to do. You got to pick a night and you got to say, all I do is photography that night.
Because I have so many pictures.
Yeah.
And they're just sitting on hard drives. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, that's really nice.
What? I really need to get myself into it and start editing the pictures and you're right. I'm probably going to look at my week and say, okay, this is going to be the morning or the afternoon. That's all I'm going to do.
And you would ask me earlier, does martial arts help you be a better lawyer? I think photography helps me be a better lawyer too. And here's why. There are obviously some lawyers who have become famous for being good lawyers, but also for that's all they do, is they're lawyers. And I'm sure we can all think of some examples of they're very good lawyers, but they don't necessarily have that work-life balance. Now, some people can do that. Some people can spend 90% of their time honing their legal skills.
Yeah.
I am not one of those people. I can't do it. And just like I've learned to be a better cross-examiner by doing martial arts, I've learned to be a more creative lawyer by doing photography.
Interesting.
And you have to have, I believe, a creative outlook or a creative part of your life, especially if your job is not terribly creative.
Right.
And the whole thing about law is when you're arguing a new, novel area of the law, it becomes very difficult because it's all based on precedent.
Exactly.
And reflecting whatever new arguments come have to have their basis in cases that were decided before.
Right.
And it can seem like a really regimented kind of existence. And to have a creative outlook, in my case is photography, it just helps my brain to not always think in terms of black and white.
It's interesting what you've been saying in how, most people would probably see being a lawyer as this box, being a martial artist over here, being a photographer there, but you grab everything and I think you help each one of these boxes of life helps the other box.
Exactly. I think they're independent. So people put these bios on their Instagram.
Yeah.
My bio has 3 words: photographer, martial artist, lawyer. That's it. That's all it says. And they're all, to me, just like you just said, they're all part of the whole life experience.
Yeah.
And you need that because here's the
other. It's funny you're saying that. I just downloaded a new app yesterday actually, and bio, And I was literally having a hard time to put a bio, because you keep hearing you need to make sure that people understand what you do. But what if you do a lot of things?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, why is that an issue nowadays? Why does everything have to be, you're a photographer,
Yeah.
or you're a lawyer, or why can't you be a photographer, lawyer, and you know what I mean? It's really weird that somehow people expect you to be just that one thing, singular thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Jack of all, master of none, or whatever they say. And I think that's a mistake. I think you need a varied life. Yeah.
You can't be defined by one thing that you do in life. It's impossible.
No, because human beings are not single dimensional.
Exactly.
We have multiple dimensions, and in order to be well-rounded people.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Another vote for Jamie.
You heard it here now.
That's right. That's
not just
right.
by me.
It's and you know what? It makes you better at the one thing you're maybe being paid to do. And that's why we've been talking about this, and you've asked me, how does martial arts make you a better lawyer? How does photography make you a better lawyer? I don't earn money doing photography. I don't earn money doing martial arts. But
it helps the money.
It helps me to make money in my regular profession.
100%, absolutely. Yeah. The creativity, the structure that we have in martial arts, 100%.
And the discipline.
And the discipline, yeah.
And the other thing is that the stress
that's a big one for me.
Of being a lawyer, of realizing the most common things, I'm sure you know, is that people ask, as soon as they find out I'm a criminal defense lawyer, how can you defend somebody who's guilty, right? And my answer to that is, it's a lot easier than defending someone who's innocent.
Well,
because think about the stress level, okay?
Yeah.
If I'm acting for someone I believe is innocent, as in law they are presumed to be anyways, and they get convicted wrongfully, I have to think about, I've just participated in a miscarriage of justice.
That's right.
There's somebody sitting in jail for a crime I believe they did not commit. And that makes the exercise incredibly stressful. If I believe the guy's guilty, well, if he's convicted, well, justice was served. And if he's not, well, I did my job well.
Yeah.
And I protected the institutions in our society that make it not be a police state.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we talked a little bit about corruption in other countries and war in other countries and that sort of thing. You know, you have corruption and you have torture and all the horrible things that happen in authoritarian states because they don't have the rule of law.
Yes. Because
people are not innocent until proven guilty. People are arrested and held without charge or without trial.
Yeah, a lot of these places, dictatorships and whatever, yeah.
Yeah, and you just don't, the legal process, due process, is not a factor at all. And so, yeah, sometimes I guess it would be difficult if you represented someone who you believed, although I'm not the jury, I'm not the judge, it's not my job to figure out this. Exactly. I play one part in the administration of criminal justice, and we hope that the trier of fact, whether it's a jury or a judge, makes the right decision based on the work that I do, based on the work that the prosecutor does.
Yeah.
Right.
No, absolutely.
But you're in a society where the way, you know, the way they deal with enemies of the state is just to make them disappear. And that's, you know, just to be able to have a system where I can do what I can do makes it safer for everybody.
And that's the hope that we have, that we can continue to have that those options available to us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And getting back to the other sort of stuff that we were talking about, I think I do that better because I have these creative and martial instincts that I get from other stuff that I do in my life. And this was the point of telling you all about what's more stressful, defending the innocent or defending the guilty. You got to have a stress outlet.
Yes.
And it's got to be a healthy one. There are lots and lots and lots of either drug addicted or alcoholic lawyers and doctors
Yeah.
and other high stress professions. Police officers.
Mm-hmm.
Alcoholism is a big problem with police.
Yeah. You need a place to release that stress.
Yeah.
And you need to, exactly, I 100% agree with you. You need to find something to release that stress in a positive way. And honestly, martial arts for me, or working out, whatever it may be, get healthier while you're relieving your stress.
Exactly.
That's it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a lot healthier to do it by coming to karate class than it is by drinking 6 beers a night, because that's the only way you can keep your brain from like exploding.
And then, the next day you're going to have that brain fog going on.
Yeah. But it's just not a healthy way to live. And I'm speaking from experience. I didn't become an alcoholic, but I told you I had an 18-year gap.
Yeah.
Starting with law school and for the first number of years in my practice. And you're sitting there, you're going nuts. Oh, this case is so disastrous for me, or something bad just happened, or you go to trial and you asked a question you thought would get you a good result, and you ended up getting hit between the eyes in terms of the answer you got, and you think you've wrecked the whole case, and now your client's going away to the pen because of something you did. The natural tendency is I need a drink.
Yeah.
I need a drink. I'll get back to work after I've had a couple of drinks.
Those vices are all they're good for a celebration, or they're good for a disappointment. They're a good excuse for any moment in your life. That's the biggest problem with these vices.
And as soon as it becomes a crutch, I can't get through this week, my job, unless I'm drinking it.
Or I'm waiting until the end of the day to get my drink, and then that one drink becomes 2, and then 3, and then it becomes a problem.
And it's amazing how much doing stuff like karate, stuff like jiu-jitsu, because you can't think of the stressful things.
No, you unplug.
Where you have to, because if your mind starts wandering while someone's either trying to choke you out or punch you in the head,
not a good option to have there.
Yeah. It really, really, really isn't. And I began, because I hadn't started jiu-jitsu yet, but I was just doing karate. But I began to realize the only time I was not going to be stressing about everything is that 1 hour when I'm trying to perfect that kata, or sparring and trying to avoid getting hit, or trying to hit the other guy. And now I've sort of doubled that time, because now, how do I stop myself from getting choked and all that? I can't be thinking of, should I have asked that question?
No, you're not going to be
earlier
thinking
today.
And we don't have our phones with us. We don't have any of the tech next to us. So the distracting beeping and the little signals that we get during the day, that's all gone. That's put away. That's downstairs in the bag. Nobody's going to hear that. So you're paying 100% attention to what you're doing. Yeah. And I feel, for me, that's been one of the biggest quote unquote excuses for me to go to class. It's because I need to unplug. I need those 45 minutes to an hour that we're just there. We're just doing our thing in karate. Yeah. For me, that's a blessing, because I'm away from all of the tech, because I'm surrounded by tech all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just overwhelming. And, being able to be in the dojo and just relaxing and doing what we need to do.
Even though you're not really relaxing.
Not really.
It's in fact, you're doing the opposite of relaxing.
Yeah, true.
But by being so physically active, you're relaxing your brain.
Exactly, because you're either paying attention to what you're being told to do, because you need to know what you're going to do afterwards, and then you're paying attention to what you're doing.
Yes.
And then on top of that, if you're doing that exercise with a partner, you don't want the partner to be the one kicking you or punching you, so you need to pay attention.
Yep.
And now you have an added responsibility to your partner, to not screw up the exercise. So you're 100% in. There's no out.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're out, then you're going to get choked.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You can't, and our instructors will say this in terms of sparring, for example. Mm-hmm. You're either sufficiently away from your opponent that you're not going to get hit by them, or you're committed in your own attack. But you can't be hanging out in an area where you can get hit, but you don't have a plan.
Exactly.
You know, you can't do that. And your mind has to be completely. And that, you know, the whole concept of mindfulness, right?
Yes.
And that something like karate is moving meditation. And you have to be.
I keep saying it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep saying it. For me, it's meditation.
It is.
Yeah.
I once read a book recommended by Hanchi actually, called When Buddhists Attack. And it was about the relationship between Buddhism and martial arts, mostly Japan, Japanese martial arts. But the guy who wrote the book, who is himself a karateka, he would go to these mindfulness sessions where all you do is meditate but be very mindful of what's going on around you. And that would improve his karate, but also his life. And I think that's part of the whole Zen idea, is that you get in touch with the world and not let your mind take you to other places.
Yeah.
In combat, you can't afford to have your mind going to other places.
Yeah, and it's a natural thing for our mind to do.
Yeah.
So being able to control that is definitely a skill.
Yeah.
It's definitely a skill.
Yeah.
I don't want to let you go without us talking a little bit about food.
The sine qua non.
Not because it's not dinner time yet, but I follow you on Facebook, and you make me hungry every single time I look at your posts. There's always some delicious plate going on.
Yeah. Well,
what is that all about?
Okay, so I guess there is one other thing to my. I mean, there's many other things to my life, but that's another big thing. You're right, and you're absolutely right that my Facebook has devolved into 90% of the time just being dish of the day.
It's just like.
So, a number of years ago, I actually got into wine before I got into food.
Okay, so we should have had Vincenzo here.
Yeah, at the same time. So, that's why I loved watching that podcast.
I think this is going to be another podcast.
Yeah,
Vincenzo and
we'll put
Lorne
the two together
to talk about wine.
So, right about when I first became a lawyer, so I would have been in my early 20s, right? And so I really was into wine, and I wanted to start learning more about wine. But then the more I learned about wine, the more I realized that when you go to a restaurant, the vast majority of restaurants, first of all, the wine costs 3 times as much or more than you could have bought it for at the LCBO or even from a private agent. And there's not only that issue, but the issue of most restaurants, unless you're at a very high-end restaurant, they're going to have the same plonk all the time, and the wine's not going to be aged, and you're not going to get the best product. So I started thinking to myself, I got to learn how to cook. Because the only way, first of all, that I'm going to be able to afford wine is to buy it myself, not at a restaurant.
Correct. And to pair it with the right food, right?
And make the right food and learn how to pair it. And the pairing thing, and one of the reasons why in my Facebook posts, I will always, not always, but vast majority of times, I will put a pairing suggestion.
You do suggest it, yeah.
It took me 20 years how to do that. Like I've never been a sommelier, and I haven't taken that kind of course, but it's like a science. And you began to realize what kinds of foods go with what kinds of flavors or aromas. And that's how you match wine to food. Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize it, but once you're given the right wine for the food you're eating, you will notice the difference.
Yeah.
Right? Whenever I go out to dinner with a friend that knows what wine should go with that food, and orders the wine, then you're like, there's something different here.
The food tastes better.
Yeah.
And the wine tastes better.
Exactly.
Because these things complement each other.
Exactly.
And like I said, and I've got, I still every once in a while, I'm sort of, oh God, what do I do? Like last night I made a steak, but I had curried it. Mm-hmm. And then I made a dressing with it that included, peppers, chili peppers, a serrano chili pepper, and Persian cucumbers and a bunch of different flavors, including fish sauce. So we've got some Asian flavors. We've got some heat and spice.
Yes,
and we've got some curry. So normally with a steak, those kind of flavors, my favorite wine would be like Cabernet Sauvignon or Syrah with steak.
Yeah.
But once you start introducing those kind of spices and those kind of flavors, I don't think that kind of wine, a Cabernet Sauvignon, for example, will taste as good. And I don't think the steak flavored as it is will be as good. So I went with a Spanish wine. Why? Because Spanish food tends to be spicier. Or tends to can sometimes have more of a
And was the
curry.
result favorable?
It was.
All right.
It was fantastic. I went with...
Or flavorable?
Flavorable. So I did a Tempranillo from Ribera del Duero in Spain, and it was just a gorgeous. And so, you know, the real black fruit kind of stuff went well with the steak, but then the acidity and some of the secondary flavors went more, in my mind, and these things are subjective.
Of course.
So what works for me is going to be different from you. What I put out when I put those posts out is, here's just generally.
And now you do you.
and then you do you. But this is something that works for me. For many, many years, you know, cheese and wine. I always used to think it was a red wine. And then I read somewhere that, you know, try a white wine. It's got better acidity and it's better for most cheeses and stuff. And it's true. And beer and cheese is great.
Really?
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic.
I've ever had beer and cheese.
Yeah,
like specifically.
try it. Yeah,
Okay.
because there's something about the hops and versus the and the bitterness versus the creaminess and almost sweetness in cheese that is just a dynamite combination.
Now I'm hungry. Okay. That's it. We're going to have to pull it quits.
We got to go eat now.
I got to go eat now. Eat and drink.
That's right.
Lorne, it was such a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you
so
so
much. It
much.
was so nice to have this conversation with you, to learn more about you, about what you do. And I kind of feel like we have enough to go on for another podcast, which might happen with Vincenzo. We might do a wine and cheese podcast.
Yeah,
that would be
we
amazing.
could do, and Vincenzo is one of the guys who helped teach me about pairing Italian wines. Because I met Vincenzo when he was a waiter and a wine guy at Il Covo, the Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
And it's like you'd get this multi-course dinner, and Vincenzo would go and he would tell you, this wine is going to work really well with this food, and he would explain why.
He definitely knows his stuff.
And he really does. And all of these little things are going into my head. I'm absorbing them.
Lorne, I think we're gonna have that wine and cheese. Vincenzo, if you're watching this,
Yes.
get those bottles of wine ready. It'll be a very long podcast. But
Yeah, very long. Okay, so I'll bring the food. Vincenzo will bring the wine.
And I bring the mics.
And you'll bring the mics. And we'll all eat and drink.
There you go. All right, it's a deal.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.